Coming up next on Insights on PBS Hawaii, how can we help veterans and their families cope with mental health issues? Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Malia Maddock. Since 2001, the majority of U.S. ground troops deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan have experienced high-intensity guerrilla warfare, as well as the threat of roadside bombs and improvised explosives. Reports of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, depression, and substance abuse have increased among veterans readjusting to civilian life. What behavioral health services are available for Hawaii's veterans, as well as their families who might need support during and after their loved ones' deployments? How can we help veterans and their families cope with mental health issues? We invite you to join our conversation by calling, emailing, or tweeting your questions and comments. Now to our panel. Michael Peacock is the founder of Hawaii Vet to Vet, an organization that provides veterans with peer-to-peer support for mental illness and addiction issues. Michael is a non-combat veteran who served as an Army medic from 1980 to 1981. Griselda Hernandez is a marriage, family, and child therapist, as well as a Marine wife and mother of 3. Chaplain Stephen Jensen served in the Marines for 27 years. Since 2011, he has been a full-time volunteer with the Wounded Warrior Detachment Hawaii at the Marine Corps base in Kaneohe. Dr. Alyssa Mansfield is an epidemiologist at the Department of Veterans Affairs National Center for PTSD. She has studied mental health disorders among veterans. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Doctor, let's start with you. You've done a lot of studies on this. Can you give us an overview of what sort of health challenges are facing returning veterans?
Sure. You actually touched on the top 3 conditions that we usually see among veterans in terms of mental health, and that is depression, and then PTSD, and then substance use. And it's actually very common to see those conditions occurring together. So you'll often see a veteran who has a diagnosis of PTSD as well as substance use, or PTSD and depression. They just tend to co-occur.
Chaplain, you see this day to day. Can you tell us a little bit about how these sort of issues affect the men and women whom you see and work with?
The stories that they tell about the things that they have seen in Afghanistan and Iraq would shake anyone. It's my opinion that you cannot go into harm's way and not be changed. Some of them have seen children killed in front of their eyes, or children try to attack them. Some have lost their best friends despite their best efforts. Certainly a lot these days have joined because of 9/11, and they feel a great sense of patriotic pride, but there are challenges to their moral core in a lot of ways. And of course, the veterans that we're talking about are not just post 9/11. We certainly have a lot still from the Vietnam era who are challenged and who still don't believe that they qualify for a lot of assistance. And so there's a great deal of effort from the Department of Veterans Affairs and from the active duty military to reach them and invite them to the same kind of treatment that they appreciate and take advantage of.
Michael, you've made the transition from service into civilian life. What were your expectations when you were leaving, and how did that square up with the reality that you faced?
Well, 30 years ago when I got out, we didn't really know what was going to happen. It's just a matter of life goes on. You missed the paycheck because you're used to getting paid, but I really can't say I had a set expectation of what was going to happen. You just move forward as best you can.
Was it easy, the transition?
Not really, because of the employment. There's a disconnect with employment. This is a problem that still goes on today. You have active duty military personnel that are highly trained and capable of doing the job, and there's a disconnect in the accreditation process. So you could be, like I was, a combat medic, paramedic equivalent in the military, and then when you get out, the civilian world won't recognize your training. And this causes stress. And then we have the depression and all these other issues that come in because you've actually said you would die for your country, and you have to trust these folks. They're going to train you, and then when you get out, all the training that you received is basically useless. So that's not coping. You know, you have to learn to cope, and so that's really, there's some disappointment as well. Yeah.
And it's not just the service members who are dealing with the coping, it's also family. Griselda, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, you know, it's a process. You know, when our service members either get ready to separate, retire, or they come back from deployments, you know, it's life altering. The reintegration process that was established, that they started years ago, maybe a decade or two ago, at times it didn't hit the core of what needed to happen to help the reintegration be a little bit more smooth on both ends for our troops coming home and us, the spouses, receiving them home. There was just lack of awareness, really. You know, when I talked to my husband and we talked about what his expectations were coming into the Corps, you know, it's kind of, that unknown is there. I don't know what I know I want to serve my country, I want to die for my country, but I really don't know what I'm going to be exposed to. And when they come back from a deployment, that's really hard. It is definitely life altering. There's little pieces that get, in my eyes, that you just lose from them, you know, and the person you married is altered. It changes with every deployment, and you're trying to understand how to support them.
You were saying that was one of the things you kept in mind as you were saying goodbye, is sort of anticipating how your husband might change when he returns, right?
Yes, yes, how he was going to change and how I was going to prepare my son at that time, because my husband left out to several deployments during the first 7 years of his life, and how to prepare him for when Daddy came home, you know, and so that he won't feel like it was his fault for Daddy's irritability or lack of patience, or the need, very black and white thinking, right and wrong, you know, so that his anxiety wouldn't go up, and then he would think it's his fault, you know, and my husband to feel that, you know, he's feeling rejected by my son because he's not going to him anymore, you know, he's coming to Mommy. So, because
they're gone for a very long time and life changes.
Yes, and they're so used to having Mom for everything, Mom, yeah. or if the dad's at home, you know, they're so used to having one of them home for everything, that to put him back into our lives and create that hierarchy again and say, no, now it's Mom and Dad, now you have to ask both, you know, both of us for permission. It's hard to retrain their brain and also to reintegrate them into our roles too.
Mm-hmm. Now, Alyssa, you've actually done some studies on this, on the effects of sort of these deployments on children and wives. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I did a study several years ago that looked at the effect of deployment on mental health in spouses and children of active duty Army personnel. And I point out that it was Army because as much as I would like to say this is the exact same thing we'd see in other branches of the military, I don't know that for sure, but it was a very large study. It looked at about 200,000 spouses and about 300,000 children, and using their medical records looked to see if the length of time that the military member was deployed was in any way related to mental health diagnoses that we might have seen in the spouses or children. And it's not really a surprise to people. Of course, the longer an individual was deployed, the more likely we were to see things like, in the spouses, things like depression, sleep disorders, anxiety, stress-related conditions. In children, it was similar. Boys tended to do worse than girls. We think that might be because perhaps parents are more willing to bring the boy to the doctor, and they're more likely to be diagnosed. But You know, in a sense, the results were common sense, but they showed that on a very large scale, the effect that these deployments were having. And that study in particular showed that it wasn't just the fact that the military member was deployed, it was the length of that deployment that mattered. The longer cumulatively that they were deployed, the worse off their family members were.
And of course, in the last 20 years, you know, your husband, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, these are long and tough deployments.
Yes, and the older our kids are, as we stay in the Corps or in the service, the more aware they are of the ramifications and the consequences of their mom or dad serving our country. They worry, their anxiety goes up. You know, we open their eyes to a world maybe that we don't want them to see or not to learn about yet, and they become very worried. They become very worried over their parents' life, and that's a constant questioning. Why is it taking so long? Is Daddy okay? And sometimes the media puts too much information out there for our children to see and interrupts their shows, for instance 9/11 when it happened, or certain bombings, and the kids start asking all these questions.
It's worrying.
And it's worrisome, and it just rocks their foundation, and then they're like, Daddy needs to get out, or Mommy needs to get out. I need him safe. So.
Well, there's one thing I'd add to what Griselda is saying, and that is, in the research that I did, you do see that the older children tend to have a harder time. I think it's that they understand the danger that's facing their parent who's deployed more than a younger child does, but also they're more likely to have been through multiple deployments. The older they are, they're going through this phase where, as time's going on, mom or dad keeps leaving, and they're realizing what's happening. They're at an age where they actually understand the danger.
Are you seeing these issues in Wounded Warriors?
We do. I've been around for some 40 years now with the military, and we always knew about the deployment cycle, but so many years ago, decades ago, during Vietnam, we didn't have the kinds of pre, mid, post-deployment briefings for families to help them understand the family dynamics that might occur. The whole reintegration issue, the challenges to kids, children wondering if there's something wrong with me that makes Dad leave all the time, or when I come back, Dad has changed, so what's wrong with me? And some of the non-military children that they go to school with don't quite understand, so they ask questions, and sometimes they make statements that are challenging the kids, wondering again about the safety of their parent. So for decades, and I'm sure longer, we've attempted to deal with this proactively, and we have more and more services available. We've seen it before combat, the same kinds of challenges for families and children, but certainly with what we see on television about the combat in Afghanistan and the insurgencies and so on, the more I think that's ratcheted up.
Right. And there are some new and good services for people available. Michael, can you talk about Hawaii Vet to Vet? What inspired you to start that?
Well, I was homeless 5 years and wanted to get my life back together. As a relationship, drinking as a coping mechanism, those all kinds of things come into play. But the VA, we had a recovery coordinator at the time who gave me a phone number to a national conference call, and I started to listen in. And because I have a background in ministry as well, I thought it would be, something that could be beneficial to veterans in Hawaii. So that's why I continued to do that. I needed something to do. Like I said, I was homeless 5 years, so I was really unemployable. I had legal issues at the time. Nobody really was going to hire me. So because I have family support, I was able to just focus on trying to create something where people could get information and help themselves as well.
Explain the peer-to-peer element. Can you tell us about that?
Peer-to-peer is more like shared experience. And so I've never been to combat, but a veteran that a service member that goes to combat and comes back, reintegrates in a positive fashion, and we have a service member that comes back and reintegrates in a negative fashion, that one that reintegrated in a positive fashion could actually help the one that's having trouble, you know, with the coping, using self-medication or whatever for coping. So basically, peer support is shared experience, helping someone go from a negative lifestyle to a positive lifestyle. Sometimes veterans will not connect with a clinician or even a chaplain because they don't trust the system. And just like when she's talking about when her husband comes home, and you know, the system, we're trying to get better, but there is some information available now, but it's not like they say this is what's going to happen. Your kids are going to, you know, your husband's going to, they don't tell you about all that stuff up front. So you're behind the curve.
I think that was something you were mentioning, that you'd like to see service members given more information before they leave, more of a preparation in terms of rejoining civilian life. Is that something all of you think would be beneficial to increase the amount of information coming into service members?
You know, I mean, a lot of the research that's been done talks about resiliency. I mean, not every veteran who has gone to Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam or any of these other operations comes back and has PTSD or depression. So something is allowing some of them to come back and reintegrate in a more adaptive way than others. And so we hear this term resiliency, but I think it's still somewhat of a mystery. We're not sure exactly why some individuals come back and have a more difficult time. We're starting to identify something. Social support is huge. And, you know, as Michael's talking about, sometimes having an individual just to talk about what they're feeling with, who they feel understands, could be what makes the difference. But there's no doubt that I think the more information that can be given up front, if for no other reason, just to prepare families and military personnel for what could happen. You know, not like this will happen, but this might happen, and, you know, just to start a dialogue with their family.
It's empowering.
It is.
It is empowering. The more you know, you can prepare. Granted, you know it's not going to go by the book, but it's information that you have. You know, when I first started attending the post and the pre-briefs, you know, it let me know what exactly was going to go on while he was there. When the CEO would introduce himself, say, this is what our mission is. When they started handing out pamphlets for the children to do about the pre-deployments, how to stay in contact with that, that was awesome. When they came out with that instant, it was a website, instant where they could write an instant note to mom and dad, and that day they received it. My son was on the computer often writing to dad. But it was empowering. You know, I had contact with my dad versus before. You know, we had to wait. Sometimes I wouldn't hear from my husband for 2 months. And here you were inundated with all this stuff on the news about what's going on. And you're like, you pray to God, I hope he's okay. I hope he's okay. You know, and you prepare. You prepare your children as best as you can with the information you have at that time. At that time. So,
here's a question from Ken. Do Native Hawaiian veterans have mental health problems at a higher rate than other ethnic groups of veterans? Do Native Hawaiian veterans have greatly different kinds of mental health problems than other ethnic groups? And if so, please describe those ethnic differences. Of course, I don't think that was covered in the studies that you have done, but any information on that?
You know, I wish I could speak to that more than I'm able to. Our division of the National Center for PTSD here is actually focused on cross-cultural issues, and it's something that we're definitely starting to incorporate a lot more in the work that we do. I'm not sure actually about the numbers. I don't know if you know anything about that, Steve.
I don't know about the numbers. I do know, for example, when I was a pastor in Kona, when, as we say, the balloon first went up, when the National Guard was first called up, we didn't have things in place for National Guard families as well as the individuals deploying. And so the community came together, and knowing enough to invite the kupuna and the leaders of the community to talk about the challenges that families would face during deployment and the military members would face when they came back. It was important for them to give permission to the returning people to get help if they needed it, but certainly to be there to support the families. That doesn't answer the question with the numbers, but I think it says that we in the VA and we in the community are trying to be attuned to those needs and realize that there are certain cultural differences that are important to understand, recognize, and take advantage of on their behalf.
Part of the peer support is cultural competencies, and Native Hawaiian veterans do have different issues, just like Indians, African Americans, to be politically correct. Everybody has cultural competencies that need to be addressed. So some of the stuff that goes on, because we're in the SAMHSA team, I'm aware of some of these other programs, there are trying to reconnect the Native Hawaiian to the land, the Aina, so that they can have this, there's a rhythm, I say, for recovery. There's a rhythm that we had before we were deployed, before we went to the kill zone, as they say, there was a rhythm, and that rhythm was the peace. And that's the cultural piece that is missing for the Native Hawaiian, is to reconnect with that peace.
Very interesting. All right. From Roy, our income tax form should include a checkoff box to donate money to help veterans programs. I donate to that. From Sharon, we all love the troops, but do you believe that the average American truly appreciates the damage that war wreaks on soldiers and their families? What would you tell us to help us understand? Any thoughts on that?
I think I constantly find myself even educating just my family, my extended family, on just the consequences of my husband being in the service, and just so they could have a broader understanding of what it means. You know, this is his profession, this is his career, and he's entitled to have a family. He's entitled to have children. He's entitled to have a regular life when he's able to. I'm cognizant that he doesn't belong to me. He belongs to the military, and when he is home, it is a privilege because he's home and he's able to be home with us. But we appreciate it, and it's not like he could choose his duty stage, say, this is where I'm going to be. I'm going to make sure we're here for 4 years like that. You don't have to change high schools. And you could graduate from the same high school. Because I know how detrimental it's going to be if we end up moving your senior year and you have to go to a new school your senior. We wish it could be like that, but it's not. It's not like that. That would be in a perfect world. And just getting their support, educating them and saying we're doing the best we can and preparing our children if they do have to transition to new schools and make new friends, having them appreciate that and making the best of it. We like to think, I think, as military families, we like to think our kids become more well-rounded and more flexible towards life, because they know that life is constantly changing in their world, so.
I think the average American should realize that their freedom, their voice, the ability for them to say whatever they want, do whatever they want, even their ability to not serve, is because of the military, because of the men and women who sacrifice, give up time with their loved ones, and in some cases lose everything they have and end up homeless. That's the average American should really realize that freedom is not free.
Definitely. Yes. Freedom is not free. It's a sacrifice.
I think that there has been a very positive change since 9/11 with the population at large being appreciative of the military, and with all of the publicity about the wounded, ill, and injured, there are a lot more people in the community in Hawaii in particular that want to help our veterans and our active duty people and their families than actually we can take advantage of.
Really?
And to me, that's outstanding. It certainly speaks of the aloha spirit here and the sense of ohana. However, with the drawdown, both in Afghanistan and the drawdown in the military, with the population being tired of a decade plus of war, it seems to me that people are starting to wane in their understanding and support, to a degree, not a great amount, but to a degree. Because I hear regularly from people who have left the military, particularly medically retired, those with PTSD and traumatic brain injury and other challenges. Many of them believe that when they go home to their families on the mainland, that the families will instinctively understand the challenges that they face, and they don't. So when they have their nightmares, when they have their short attention span, when they have their intrusive thoughts, when they curl up in a ball because of a loud explosion, sometimes the families get to the point where they're telling them to man up, to grow a backbone, to get out and be a member of society again. And that's very hard when your family, the people who are supposed to understand you best, can't do that.
So if there's a family member tonight listening to this conversation, what are organizations or steps that they should take to help a loved one? Where do you go?
I think first you have to be ready to seek the help, you know, and the service member has to be open, and it's not a sign of weakness. I think once they get over that hurdle, that they're doing it for themselves versus for their children and their spouse, for themselves, then it starts kind of the healing process and the moving forward to recognize, okay, this is what I need to do to help them get the services that are out there, because the services there's so much out there with all this increased awareness. They're out there, but when you're in your own, dealing with your own stuff, you can't see them. And once they're ready, then they can step forward and they're accepting. You know, how many times, I know personally, how many times have we avoided taking our own children to see a counselor because we didn't want our issues out there. We would tell our kids to man up, or, you know, it's okay, you know, you're fine, you're making a big deal out of nothing. You know, your daddy's fine, I don't know why you're worried, your mom's fine, because we don't want that label on our children. But the more we recognize, hey, you know, it's, you know, it looks like a red flag, the more empowering it gives us to heal and to help us move forward them so that we can follow. Because it's harder when the family's moving forward and they're falling behind. Yeah. Because they're not ready.
They can go to the faith-based community. We do work with the Vet-to-Vet program does do work with the Catholic Church, and there's other faith-based organizations. There's crisis line numbers people can call. You know, the VA, yeah.
Vet Center?
Yeah.
And the VA made a big difference for you, right? You were
Yeah,
saying.
the VA made a difference for me because they have resources. Granted, they're not always timely, but they have resources available to help, and they have trained staff, you know, and there's people. This is one of the misconceptions that I think we need to overcome, is that people think the VA doesn't really care, but there's people working there, and you have to. I was telling somebody the way I cope sometimes is I might just take a couple weeks off before I go back, you know, because everybody's got something that they're dealing with,
And of course, during this federal shutdown, we became very aware of how key the VA was for a lot of people and how stressful that situation was for a lot of potentially the most vulnerable, right? Was that something you heard a lot about from people?
We did. There were quite a lot of people who asked for referrals outside of the VA because they simply weren't available. And so there were a number of people in the community who stepped forward, mental health providers and clergy and churches, who made themselves available. The National Center for PTSD, Senator Akaka, Senator Hirono, 2 years in a row we did a training for island-wide spiritual and pastoral counselors to help them understand the challenges of post-traumatic stress and TBI and how they could support individuals and families. The Vet Center is one of the places I know that troops like to go because they feel it's outside the system and it's less likely information will be shared or recorded. And some are still afraid that diagnosis of PTSD means that they can't get jobs with law enforcement and so on.
That's interesting because this question from Tom on the Big Island touches on that point. I'm a veteran with PTSD. Most veterans don't immediately go to the VA. They worry about the stigma associated with PTSD. Veterans are responsible for their own recovery. I turn to triathlon. So interesting, the issue of stigma that you've all brought up.
I'd like to address the stigma issue. We need veterans that have gone from that negative to the positive to speak out. And there was a gentleman that we talked to the other day that doesn't want to be tied to PTSD. I did a presentation on peer support for veterans and family members with PTSD, and I suggested we drop the D. And one guy said, well, you wouldn't be able to medically. I'm just talking about as a peer support person, because really what is PTSD, post-traumatic stress, is something that everybody has because it's post-traumatic event. So if you were in an auto accident, I was in a car that flipped over. If I don't like the way you drive, I'm not riding with you. It's just that simple. You know what I mean? So
It's very logical, right?
So those are the things I agree with him that a veteran has a level of responsibility for their own recovery. But if there's no one willing to help, if I don't see somebody has improved their life, if I don't have that, we call them poster child, that I can look at, then I really don't know that I can change.
Yeah. Alyssa, you were nodding. Any thoughts on the stigma issue?
It's something that many of my colleagues have looked at. It is definitely common, and it's something that I know both the Department of Defense and the VA have worked very hard to try to overcome and are continuing to work hard to overcome. One thing I would say, kind of to tie together a few questions that we've been talking about, family support, talking with other veterans, all of that is very, very important. If a veteran doesn't feel, or a military member doesn't feel ready to go get counseling, that's fine. But talk to someone. Yes. One thing that I have found, so I recently have completed a study where I surveyed almost 500 spouses and intimate partners of veterans in our VA healthcare system here. So it stretches from Hawaii to Guam and American Samoa. These were spouses of veterans diagnosed with PTSD, seeking care for PTSD in the VA, just to find out about their knowledge, their beliefs and attitudes, how involved they are with their veterans treatment. And at the end of that survey, so those questions alone were very interesting, but at the end of the survey, I included a few lines where a spouse or partner could put any comments they wanted to. And all I said was, if there's anything you'd like to share with the VA, anything you want any of us to know, please feel free to write it here. And about 255 of them wrote comments, some of them several typewritten pages. And if there's one thing that was very clear to me in reading those comments, it's that the spouses, the partners, the family members want to be there and support the veteran. And sometimes they just want to accompany them to an appointment, or they just want to talk to them about what they're feeling. And so I would really encourage any veteran watching, any family member watching, to try to have that conversation. And maybe it doesn't happen overnight, and maybe it doesn't mean they go to the VA or they go see anyone professionally. Maybe it just means it's a conversation that's started, and it's this supportive environment for this family. Because one thing is for sure, and that is when a veteran doesn't feel supported, when the marital relationship or the family relationship is under stress, it doesn't bode well for anyone. Their symptoms are worse. That's when divorce happens. That's when, there's just a lot of tension in the household, and it's not good for the family. It's not good for any of them.
And interesting, because one of the questions that we got on Twitter from Tara was, how can spouses seek help for their struggling loved one without being too overbearing about it?
Well, it's just doing the small checking ins. It's, how's it going? Fine, okay. That's very broad. And it's just doing brief checking in and say, I noticed you're a little bit tense. But then again, it has to do with that communication already established in the home. If you have a good communication with your spouse, then you know what route to take. You know what words to use. If you feel you cannot freely communicate to your spouse because they're constantly on edge, then yes, you have to kind of go around and figure out how to get him or her to respond to your, kind of concerning question without them being defensive. And that's kind of like at times walking on eggshells, but even through those walking on eggshells episodes, you'll find that the road will become clear.
I'd like to add to that, to educate yourself on
Yes,
these
exactly.
things. Yeah, because in peer support or recovery work that we do, you have the relationship issues. And if I could learn something about what the other person is experiencing, then I could, help them in that way as well.
That's true.
I was going to say on the National Center for PTSD website, which is ptsd.va.gov, there are links specifically for family members and spouses and others kind of getting at this issue. It helps educate them about PTSD and related conditions, and gives them some tools and resources, not just to help the veteran or the military member, but also to help themselves.
Yeah, that was an important one. Could you repeat that again a little slower, Alyssa?
Sure. It's ptsd.va.gov, and that's the website for the National Center for PTSD.
All right.
There's also military.com has a good website for kind of peer-to-peer assistance in people being able to type in questions and get responses from people who've been there, done that. But also, Griselda is part of a spouses or a caregivers group. And if you recall on the retreat we did, there was some sharing about how you can cope, but how you can give your husband some clues. So some of the spouses had nicknames for the husband when they were acting out.
Whenever we notice that their behavior is just becoming a little bit more questionable, or their mood is elevating. There's little words you use between each other, or there's a a rub of the ear or just a shoulder, and that's just for them to know, hey, maybe you need to scale it down, or maybe you need to, take a walk out,
And
just to help
give a
him.
verbal clue.
Yes, take a deep breath versus putting them on the spot. That's
Yeah.
one thing they don't like, is to put them on the spot. And the more educated you become about the symptoms, the more empowering you feel, and less guilty, like if you're doing something wrong.
Is there a hotline if a family member feels that they're in crisis or is very concerned? Is there any kind of hotline available, or
There's a crisis line.
through the VA?
There's a VA crisis. There's several crisis lines.
Okay, and so one would check there for a number.
They can Google.
Okay,
Yeah.
for help. We're getting a lot of questions. I want to get through them. Sharon on Kauai reminded me of a very important thing, and I'm glad she brought this up. What treatment is offered on the neighbor islands? There are some additional challenges for veterans on the neighbor islands that lack some of the resources that we've got on Oahu, correct?
That's true, but we also have some satellite sites on the neighbor islands from the VA.
We do. Several of the islands have community-based outpatient clinics, or CBOCs as we call them. Now, not all of the islands have them. If they don't have a VA facility, so either obviously if they're not on Oahu, or if they're not on a neighbor island that has one of these CBOCs, and they don't feel that they have adequate non-VA resources, there's also, telemental health is becoming more and more popular now, and it's a way to reach veterans and military members who may not be near a VA location or have another mental health provider near them that they could see. So sometimes that involves, for example, some of my colleagues are doing research where they use tablets and they can actually deliver therapy to veterans through an iPad or an iPad-like device, and that's becoming more and more popular.
And again, that's something that anyone listening that's interested research through the VA.
On the VA website, there's on the bar across the top, it says locations. If they click that, it'll pull up.
They can get that information.
Yeah, and most every island has a CBOC of some sort. And you can also email people and things like that. But we are, through the SAMHSA project, working to better know where all the resources are.
So that's the SAMHSA is the State's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services.
Yeah.
And that can be a resource. All right, from David on the Big Island, do any of the panel members have any experience with angry veterans who feel like they were used and abused? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I work with the clergy as well, and they refer to call, and the guy was angry, and it's systemic. I call it systemic PTSD, because you try to get help, and maybe the person you're talking to is having a bad day or whatever, and you have that clash. And basically, it's you have to let them talk through, and you try to convince them that it's not necessarily to, you don't have to go to the extreme. We try to reapproach it. But yeah, there's a lot of angry people.
All right, as a combat veteran suffering from the symptoms of PTSD, I am in constant search for relief. I was told recently that medical marijuana has been shown to be a promising method to reduce PTSD symptoms. Please ask the panel if Hawaii is doing anything to make this alternative treatment available to veterans, given the fact that we have a state medical marijuana program. Any thoughts on that? Is that something that's being discussed in the community?
Yeah, we're talking with a guy on nutraceuticals is what they call it. And we just got a harm reduction person at the VA. And we're talking about all those kinds of things. And the one gentleman that I'm thinking of, I told him, he needs to move forward if that's really what his passion is, if he wants to introduce that nutraceutical. It's actually cannabis in a pill form, and it's supposed to help, and I got some information on that. If the person wants it, we can always figure out how to get them the information.
All right, interesting. So that might be something to look at for treatment for some people.
Yeah, we're in Hawaii, so the issue we have is we're in the middle of the ocean, and we talked about CBOC, but we have what's called a VISN, a Veteran Integrated Service Network, and we're part of San Francisco and Northern California, Northern Nevada, so a lot of the stuff stops there. So because of the vet-to-vet call, they know Mike's out here in the ocean yelling, hey, help us out, right? So in San Francisco and stuff, they have a different approach to treatment called harm reduction. So they'll take away the worst things and try to get you to improve your life. And they're more liberal in saying, if this will help you, because one of my friends went through Hep C treatment. He couldn't eat. So he needed to have medical marijuana to increase his appetite. So there's, my thought from what I learned in working with Andy and these guys is if the veteran wants help and he sincerely comes, not all angry, high maka kind, to get help, we want to help them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And find the right match. How long do the effects of war last on veterans and their families? If we are truly committed to standing by our war vets, how long does that commitment need to carry on after the war is over? From Gordon.
I think, the effects are there. If you look back, at least from my training, the first 5 years of a child's life and how they're parented and what they're exposed to builds the person in the future. If your parent is gone 75% of the time, and the other percent of the time that they're back, they're trying to learn how to reintegrate themselves, and they're going through their own personal struggles, you know. It's going to be life-altering, and mom or the other spouse that's home is struggling also to try to create a balance. It is forever altering, you know. It's a different family dynamic, you know. It has its ups and downs, and there's, like I mentioned, there's a lot of us that do seek counseling later on after swallowing our pride and admitting that, you know, we can't do it on our own, that we need outside support. We have family, you know, extended family is there, it's great, but we're not always going to share everything to extended family of what's going on at home.
I think you're affected, you know, permanently.
Yes.
When I was in the Army, I'd never been to combat, but I mentioned we were on maneuvers and one of our sergeants was smashed by a command track, and I was a medic. We had to pick him up. We rode in the Gamma Goat with the body. I still remember that, you know, and that made me change my mind about being in the military, because it was like an unnecessary death in my mind, because we weren't in combat at the time. Accidents happen, but I still think about that. And I know people today that have made it through, and they may be self-medicated and got in trouble with the military or whatever, but they retired and they don't want to be involved with helping others or anything like that. So you're always affected. It's a permanent thing. The manifestation of what happens, is it going to be a positive or a negative manifestation from there? That's really the question.
I think I would add something to that too. I don't think anyone can say exactly how long war affects an individual. I think it's going to be different from person to person. Yeah. But I would agree with Michael that war probably affects someone for the rest of their life. Mm-hmm. That being said, there are a lot of treatments out there that are helpful. So even if you're affected in some way, it doesn't mean that if you're suffering, you're not going to get better.
That's why I talked about the manifestation, the positive or negative. The negative manifestation would be using alcohol and drugs to where you're no longer functionable in society. Whatever.
We know what you mean.
Yeah. Watch too much TV.
The positive side, our working numbers are roughly 30% of the military population may be diagnosed with PTSD.
That's too high. I would say it's lower than that.
All right.
What would you say it's at?
Go ahead.
I think it's probably closer to 10 to 15. This is based on veterans who are getting care in the VA. We don't know. I mean, we can't actually say how many people are diagnosed, because we only really know about the ones who are seeking care. And so it's...
Right. So,
yeah.
But my personal opinion, just based on the current active duty and retirees that I know who are reluctant to seek help, I would say the number is probably closer to 30, but my point is that 70% that aren't. And there are a lot of people who are transitioning out of the military who are deciding that they want to make positive use of the life that they have. So many that had close calls, so many that were injured and recovered. They want to make a significant contribution. They want to feel like they're still worthwhile, and they have a great deal outside of uniform to give to the nation. And I think we shouldn't be so concerned about reintegrating them back into civilian life or hiring them, because you have a great asset available to you if you'll only take a look at that and capitalize on their interest.
Yeah. That actually touches on this. I thought this was a very thoughtful question. What is needed from the military retiree community, from a Vietnam vet? How can the retired military community help?
Mike makes a good point with vet to vet. Some of the wounded warriors have gone out into the community to say thank you because they've received so much. And so, for example, they were on the canal in Kailua, and a daughter of a Vietnam vet said, would you talk to my dad? And they invited him, and they began talking simply about their combat experience. And the daughter indicated this was the first time in 40 years she had heard anything.
40.
In 40 years that she had heard anything about his issues. But some of the other neighbors heard about that, and they are veterans, so they wanted to give back too. So I'm finding that the VFWs, the American Legions, all of those groups, and we had a lady today who came to the barracks to help do a barbecue at the barracks, who's the spouse of a World War II vet. And she said, it's a way for me to show that I care. So people are demonstrating in a variety of ways that they care. Some of it is simply to say, reach out your hand and say thank you.
Exactly.
That's important. And for some of our Vietnam vets, and I include myself in that group, there were no parades. When I do a service, worship service on like Veterans Day, I always ask the veterans to stand up and be recognized, Vietnam veterans. And for some of them, it's the first time anybody's ever said thank you. So I would suggest that it's not too late to at least say thank you.
Yeah, something we should all keep in mind. This is a positive thought from Dolores and Ainahaina. The people at the Spark Matsunaga Center have been very caring and helpful with my husband's problems. They are outstanding. So there are a lot of resources in the community for people to, and they're not all through the VA. They're outside, they're at churches, they're in your organizations. Griselda, can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with the Wounded Warriors? How does that work for a family member going into the program?
With us, it has been a blessing. There are coming in, you know, when we first arrived here, we were at Fisher House due to my husband's illness. And then we entered into the Wounded Warriors, which, you know, became our second ohana. And being that they're there, they're so supportive, just helped my family kind of start moving forward, you know, with everything that has been going on. And we're very grateful and we feel blessed because we have that support we needed.
Have things gotten better for your family?
Yes, things have gotten better. I always say, for God, nothing is impossible, and He has shown us that nothing is impossible. But the fact that we're here in, you know, at Wounded Warriors in this detachment, and me being so small, it was exactly what we needed. The coffee with the ladies is a great moment just to debrief and just to touch bases. And it gives us spouses support away from our everyday routine of caring for our husbands, caring for the children, everything that we juggle. Some of us still work, some of us decided, you know, not to work. So it has been a blessing. They have shown a lot of support. You know, we've met through the Kainohe Yacht Club. We've had a lot of events through them.
That are good for the family. And Alyssa, you were saying that actually some families report that they became closer after dealing with PTSD. So
Yeah, and some of the spouse and partner comments that I received in the study that I mentioned earlier, there were more than I would have expected, accounts of couples becoming closer. And you know, I can't prove this, but what I imagine what might have happened is these couples certainly have had difficult times. I mean, the accounts that they've described, it was eye-opening for me. I don't know what it would be like to live with someone who has PTSD and try to support them and love them through this difficult time. But many of them described it bringing them closer to their spouse. And I'm guessing it's because they probably needed to get through this together. You know, it was probably very difficult for them, and they got to a turning point where they realized they needed to be there for each other and they needed to support each other. And
they were going to make it.
They were going to make it.
It's like, you know, when you marry, you say for better, for worse, through sickness and through health. And a lot of us were like, hold on. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. We're not that. We're not up there in the age in marriage.
We are in our final moment, so let me go around really quickly. Your guys' thoughts in terms of moving forward and going forward. If you could give a piece of advice for someone listening right now in brief, what would it be?
Seek help. don't worry about what other people are going to think.
Exactly.
You know, everybody, and I do mean everybody. Just take a look at Congress recently, has problems.
Isn't that the truth? Chaplain, your thoughts?
I would agree with Mike that it's not a sign of weakness to seek help. If anything, it's a sign of strength. Deciding that you're worth it and that the people around you are worth it, because PTSD, traumatic brain injury, all of these other issues don't just affect you. They affect everyone you know and who cares about you. And so it's incumbent on you to not just care for yourself for you, but to be aware that there are a lot of people who count on you and appreciate
all of you.
you.
Represent different aspects of this issue, but you've all seen signs of hope and stories of people being able to get their lives back together.
Forward, yes.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I learned a lot, and I think based on the callers, a lot of people are really very touched and concerned about this issue. So thank you. Wish you the best of luck with that. Coming up next on Insights next week, What's in a Name? Insights will air an hour later next Thursday, so PBS Hawaii can bring you the premiere of a haku inoa, To Weave a Name. The documentary film follows the journey of Kristen Marquez, a young woman who reconnects with her estranged, schizophrenia-diagnosed mother while trying to discover the meaning of her 63-letter Hawaiian middle name. Kristen will be part of the Insights panel immediately following the documentary. That's next time on Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Malia Maddock. A hui hou.